The question is, are you giving meaning to your life? Do not ask yourself, does life have a meaning? You have to ask yourself, am I giving meaning to life, here now? Welcome. Thanks for being here. We also greet all friends who will follow us live on YouTube. Magnificent tools, as we were talking with Gustavo. Even just 20 years ago, it would have been unthinkable. Maybe only the RAI could have done a live show like we're doing tonight, by making this event available to people around the world, potentially all over the world. I want to say that I'm very happy to be here back to such a public meeting live. This is the first time that I'm here back live. Last time was on February 28th. Then there were obviously all the different closures that I have to cancel all my physical commitments. But I'm happy to come back here live, because to be online is a wonderful thing, but it's not enough. We human beings, we need a physical contact, vibrant and emotional contacts, where the bodies can speak, they can speak with their own language, and only the physical presence can offer us this. So to be online, on video, it's great, and we say hello to all YouTube friends, but the physical element is irreplaceable, so do not forget about this. Do not be hypnotized by the idea that just doing teleworking, it's fine, so we don't have to think about only to be online or online school. For God's sake, dehumanization has already gone a long way. Let's stop it before it becomes irreparable. So I'm happy to make this new physical debut right here in Misano, because the series that Gustavo Cecchini organizes, he is here live with his body, it's not a hologram. These meetings, they're always full of meaning, which means they're vital. Do you agree? They are vital, capable of giving something real to those who participate in them. And just by saying these very simple words, we are affirming that an event, a situation, but also a job, have meaning to the extent that they improve our life, making it more real and more authentic. So, this connection between the meaning, a sound judgment of things, a life growth, and the growth in the awareness of what is the truth. So this connection between these different elements, this is already very interesting for today's topic. So, and I hope we will understand it right now. So the words that give meaning to life are those that give us a feeling of being more vital, and that they give us a small truth that can illuminate us, enlighten us. So tonight I would like not only to talk in an abstract way of the meaning of life, I hope we can do an authentic experience all together here. So a very small experience of the meaning as an improvement, a vital improvement, a physical energy that it's linked and connected to a very concrete enlightenment of some truth. So the meaning and the improvement of knowledge and vitality. As I often do this year in Misano, I know that Gustavo is very strict, and I propose very systematic lectures normally. I will propose you tonight 5 steps of a serene, I hope, evening walk, in which we will penetrate into this connection. It makes sense what improves our life, develops our life, and what elevates our life is always an extra quotient of truth, of light. Well, let's start our walk. First step. So I think that dealing with such a radical issue, the first thing we have to remember is that our whole existence, in every single moment, is driven by some perception of sense, direction, meaning. You know, sense, direction, meaning, every moment. We may or may not think about it. This is irrelevant. We may or not may be aware of it. That doesn't matter. But if we think about it, every single and small act in our existence is guided by an intrinsic belief in meaning. This sense is both an understandable purpose. We do one thing because we know that this thing has its own understandable purpose. Why did you come here? Because implicitly, maybe you don't think about it, but instinctively, you feel and you are convinced that coming here has a meaning, and a sense that it can give you something, maybe a benefit, a vital increase, something, right? This is implicit in every act, from the very moment that you get up in the morning and you put on your slippers. Do you put on your slippers? No. Oh, you go barefoot. Okay. But you get out of bed, right? So when you get out of bed, why do you get out of bed? Implicitly, even though you don't think about this every morning, but implicitly you are convinced that this gesture makes sense. I got up because I have to wash up. And why do you brush your teeth? It's better because if you don't, you'll get cavities, right? And then your breath will stink. So brush your teeth 3 times a day. Why? Why do you wash dishes, for example? So every little gesture we make is imbued with an implicit belief in meaning. That's clear. Again, it may be also unconscious. So, we perform every act because we're convinced that it carries a promise of good, of something good, even if it's minimal. But this is the promise. We do things from the smallest to the largest, always for the same reason. There's nothing, even when we do wrong things, we are actually convinced, mistakenly, that they will do us some good. Even a vice is driven by an intrinsic belief in meaning. Wrong. Even suicide is driven by that one that will seem a paradox. But if you listen to it in that very moment, you will listen to this. If I kill myself, I will stop suffering, for example. So I will have a benefit, some benefit, a promise of some extra good. This is very important as the first point, because otherwise one speaks in the abstract. Does life have a meaning? Does it not have a meaning? What are we talking about? Let's go to the existential. Do you understand? Radical. Let's stay here. So, the existential analysis tells us that our whole life is guided by a sixth sense, that is the sense of a sense. So the sense that there is a sense as an increment of life. The sense of life is its constant increase that we hope. We might say it's constant promised and hoped for increase. If you listen carefully to every moment, every little decision, every moment of your existence, you will discover this. This is the motive. I repeat, it can also be unconscious. We do not always think about it rationally, but we can begin to become aware of it. In the same way, Heidegger says that the sense, the Dasein, is an intrinsic connotation of the existence of being. So, being, and this is us, is that entity that gives meaning to things. Heidegger literally writes, sense is not a property that is inherent in the being. I mean, it is not that the sense is in things, or that the sense it is behind them, or that it wanders in some interworld. Only being has meaning. Let us set this well in our hearts. The first passage is very important. Sense is an existential of the being. So human beings are structured on top of this sense, meaning. Our understanding of meaning, all his life, all his thoughts, all his choices are guided, motivated, and full of this existential. There is no act, not even in a dream, that is not full of this meaning. Sense, meaning, direction, and increase of life. This is the first point. Nice first point, isn't it? Just think about how much chatter and chit-chat have been spared by having already cleared these points, especially philosophical ones. Now, the second step. Well, this is all quite clear and evident. It is clear from the moment when we get out of chatters, as Heidegger would put it, and we humbly try to get inside a real thought, which is an activity. Not every kind of chat is thinking. Thinking is a precise activity, unfortunately rare, but it is very precise. And normally when we humans, when we enter in the sphere of thinking, we feel better off, because this is our truest habitat, and since the human soul, the human being is a strange entity, it realizes this. Unfortunately, we live in an era in which thinking is so rare that we are no more accustomed to inhabit it, and therefore we are incapable of recognizing it among the many chatters, especially those about culture. So, second step. If it's so clear that all our lives is guided, oriented, and imbued with meaning, so that there is always this feeling for a meaning, then I feel there is also a problem. So if this is true, that every moment of my life is imbued with the meaning that I give to it, What happens to all the structure of meaning when we die? You understand? This is quite a problem. So, if my whole existence in every moment is guided, oriented, and imbued with meaning, which is an increase of life and meaning, when I die, all this seems to collapse into nothing. What life growth? What farther meaning? What is left of all this? And this nothingness comes back on everything I do. You know? I mean, then this whole structure of meaning, that is the structure of existence, because it's an existential of being. What does this mean? So this is the pivotal point of the human condition on Earth. So it's not just one problem among others, it's the center, it's the heart of the problem of the meaning of human life on Earth. What is the meaning of the whole structure of sense? What is the meaning of being that gives meaning? Do you understand? The being gives meaning, yes, but what is the meaning of being? Does being have a meaning? What is the meaning of the being? You know that Heidegger, on this very question, he stops, is being and time. So what is the sense of being? So the being gives meaning, okay, this is clear, but what is the meaning of being? Is there any meaning for that? There, Heidegger's philosophical research has no more words. In 1927, he interrupts being and time right on the threshold of these questions about the meaning of being, and he silences himself for many years, dedicating himself to listening to Heidegger. In other words, I have to understand if there is another way of thinking. Therefore, there is no doubt that for us every moment, even this one, even this moment has a meaning, is illuminated with a certain understanding every moment, but the whole human game of making sense of the world, this whole game, does this make sense? So is this question clear? Pay attention. This is the question. This is the question that constitutes human beings. We're human beings because we ask ourselves this question. That is to say, this game, the whole game for which, for example, Gustavo Cecchin is organizing 4 days on the meaning of life, the whole game here for which the municipality of Misano Adriatico is financing a 4-day interrogation on the meaning of life, does this make sense, or are we organizing all this thing and that it's destined to something meaningless, that has no life growth in front of it, no hope of any life growth for us? So as you can well understand, and this is the conclusion of the second part, second step. The first tells us that the meaning is something existential of the being. The second point tells us that death is the heart of the question about the meaning of life. Death is the crucial junction of this question. Right there in face of the mystery of death, then the meaning of the world, all our efforts to try and give meaning to our lives, so all these efforts, either it falls into nothing or reveals us something new, a different way of living, conceiving, and experiencing this meaning. And I believe that today, 2020, this question, this radical confrontation, comes back with its strong necessity. We can no longer overlook it. We can no longer pretend that this question does not exist. We can no longer pretend to believe that we have already answered to these questions in one way or another. We're seriously called once again, freely, joyfully, and cheerfully, to ask ourselves this question one more time, in order to understand what are the possibilities and the itineraries of the answers by overcoming cliches. The great Nietzsche, who taught us, in a part of his thought, almost to give up to this question of meaning, devising that horrible intuition of the eternal return of the identical, which basically tells you that we've already experienced and lived this moment an infinite number of times, and we'll always live it again, always the same, an infinite number of times. But Nietzsche, he also said that this is the time in which we must once again look for a purpose. So what is the purpose of all this? And now, third step. It asks us for a further work with our thoughts. I said before, true thinking is a work. It's a beautiful work. Is the true answer to the question of meaning, as we'll see. But we must also have the courage to work towards this thinking. We cannot take anything for granted. We cannot assume anything because nothing is obvious. So I ask you to be awakened, to enjoy the work of thinking. It's demanding, but it's the only thing that gives true joy, said the old Croce, the work of the spirit. It is the true place where you rediscover your absolute freedom, the freedom of the spirit, of thought, which is nothing above it, neither above nor below, that can put everything into play, which can leave the game of the world open, totally open. Well then, step number 3, I would like to share with you quickly, because we have a tight schedule. I would like to dispel within ourselves the 2 easy answers, 2 easy and useless, from my point of view, from the point of view of the thought and thinking. They are vain answers that we find, I would say, nice and ready, we find them everywhere. And what are they? The first one, I'd say, is the most frequent one. Is the one that is offered us by the dominant culture, and is the answer that says that this entire structure of meaning, the human experience as a whole, even it seeks meaning and tries to give meaning, well, this does not have any meaning in itself. So this thing is almost assumed as obvious, implicit, the structure of sense, meaning, that our whole existence is a structure for the meaning, well, in itself has no sense. This is one. As Sartre said, we are a useless passion. Yes, we're passion. We give meaning. We make a whole effort. Isn't it true? We build family, job. We build the library of Misano. It's all construction of meaning, books. everybody is working hard, Gustavo. So I've been coming in for the past 22 years, but it's been talking about the meaning, but it's all useless. Everything is useless. So we understand that you're really passionate about that, even for small things, because human beings have passion also for canasta, for burraco, all structures of meaning. Maybe to cook omelette with zucchini. We work hard on it. We fight with our mother-in-law. But would you put onions in it? She says, no, my husband doesn't like onions. He doesn't digest it. And this is also fighting about meaning. So somebody says it makes sense to put onion. The other person would say, no, that does make no sense. So we spend our life struggling for the meaning and the sense of life. So the newborn baby, he said, it's not true. I didn't rob anything. I didn't steal anything. But all this effort, in the end, has no meaning. That's what the dominant culture says. Trying to make sense does not make sense. It's necessary, but useless. It's a deception. Do you remember 𝗦𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗟𝗔? You even have to stop wishing for something else. So he's talking to himself. You must stop be wishing to be eternal, looking for a meaning. No, don't do that. Stop it. It's enough. And mud is the world. Nothing. I want to read you a short page of a great thinker, a famous thinker of the 20th century, known for his pacifism. So he's known as a philosopher and thinker, Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell, in these few lines, he describes very well this idea, which is the whole structure of meaning, that is, human life has no sense. Russell says that man is the product of causes devoid of foresight. Che la sua origine, le sue speranze e le sue paure, I suoi amori e le sue credenze non sono altro che il risultato. As for their ends, that his origin, his hopes and fears, his loves and beliefs are nothing but the result of accidental collisions of atoms that no ardor, no heroism, no intensity of thought, of feeling can preserve individual life beyond the grave. Do you understand, Gustavo? It is useless for you to toil. Don't get your hopes up at all. That all the labors of the various ages, from the very young to the very old, all ages toil and work hard. Is it true? The baby, poor little thing, 11 months, he gets up and falls, then he gets up and again, and he's doing a terrible effort all the day long. Why does he do it? Because he wants to walk, silly boy. He believes that there is a meaning. He's convinced. Is there a baby here? Well, why is he crying? Well, because he wants to eat. And why? Because he wants to grow up. Silly boy. He does know that there's no sense in it all. Oh, there's a seagull. I can hear it. He doesn't know that because it's not a being. So we have the same problem also for the seagull. So we also ask ourselves, why is the seagull doing such an effort? We think about cockroaches, scorpions, think of all the effort it takes. They have to eat each other. The gazelles and the tigers, they chase each other to eat each other. It's a struggle, and it's all useless. So that all the labors of the various ages, all the devotion, or for example, religious person, and all this splendor of human genius, it's destined to the extinction for the death of the solar system. Eventually, also the solar system will collapse. The whole temple of man's work will inevitably be buried under the debris of a collapsed universe. Happy? All these things, though not free of dispute, we could also talk about them, dear Bertrand, are such a clear certainty that no philosophy that opposes them can hope to stand. It's somewhat categorically only with the scaffolding of these truths, only on the solid foundation of an inflexible despair, we can build the dwelling of the soul. So this is the first answer that I have now read to you. And this is the brutest form, but it's better brute, because these things is continuously transmitted and given to us in more devious ways. So nobody tells you this directly, but they hypnotize us, they convince us with other words that however substantially they want to say that there is no sense at all, there is no meaning at all in life. Do you understand? So let's say this is the first answer. This perspective is being accentuated in our time through the philosophy that is now called of the big data, which is the computer structure of the world that translates all human experience into accumulated numerical data. I would say is the most advanced expression of the philosophy of absolute meaninglessness. The human being is reduced to a database. You're nothing but a set of data that can be accumulated, bought or sold. This thing, guys, is not my perspective. I quote a few lines of one of the thinkers. Let's call them prophets of the so-called dataism, which is a thought. For example, Chris Anderson, who is a great thinker, and it says, "It is finished the time of any theory on human behavior." That is to say, if nothing has a meaning, why are you asking yourself too many questions about human behavior? From linguistics to sociology, everything is finished. Forget about taxonomy, oncology, and psychology. Who knows why people do what they do? Who knows? The thing is that's it. We can record it and measure it with unprecedented accuracy, with enough data, and the numbers speaks for themselves. So do you still want to ask the meaning of things? The sense of it? No, we're not interested in the meaning. We're interested in the data to sell and buy them, through which we can control, direct your behavior. We don't care about the meaning at all. The meaning is to make money. So what's the sense of everything? We're not interested in it. We're interested in the reduction of human beings to a number to make money. So, dear guys, the first option, let's call it the option to answer to something. So this option, the whole system of meaning does not make sense. This is the option exactly that the lords of this world want us to be convinced of. They want to convince us exactly of this. They do not convince us with still lucid philosophical words of Bertrand Russell, who was speaking clearly. They persuade us with anesthesia, with hypnosis. They numb us, they make us demented, they make us unable even just to ask ourselves these questions, weak, very weak in thoughts. So do you understand that we are working with our spirit? That unfortunately is very rare. It's rare. It's rare. It's rare in the academies, it's rare in the university, it's rare in cultural centers, it's rare. People no longer want, and maybe people no longer know how to help human beings to penetrate the meaning of their own being, because many of the so-called teachers have never done them themselves. They never dedicate their lives to the true search of meaning. So what do you want that they pass on to you? They will give you what they have. It's time to wake up. The system of this world doesn't want humans to seriously ask questions about meaning, because it's a meaningless system, and therefore it needs human beings more and more convinced that there is no sense, so it can continue and pursue its goals that are absurd without finding too much of a resistance. Do you understand? If we all think here that this game is meaningless, well, then we don't want even to go against mass communication, European politics and policies. We won't have the courage, the desire to go against all this. So this world system needs that this philosophy of nonsense, of banality, of chatter, of insignificant literature triumphs, that can fill the libraries, the conferences of philosophy and literature, to hear only insipid words, because then we will be sufficiently dumb so not to realize the absurd in which they make us live. That's the first option. And then there is another one. Another one that it's opposite and complementary. So if the first one says the meaning of this existential system of the man, which is full of meaning, has no meaning, the other one will say the meaning of the things is outside of you. These are the solutions that we might call neo-fundamentalist. These are the solutions that look for sense backwards, in structures of sense and meaning external to man, even theological ones, neo-fundamentalist theologies. These neo-fundamentalist theologies, however, when we try to experience them, we perceive them as not sufficient. It appears to us as juvenile regressions. We feel that a part of us, the adult part that we have, as maybe Kant would put it, that is not satisfied. We don't want to go back to a meaning imposed from the outside. We humans, we don't want to go back to a sense that takes away our freedom, even also partly. And these answers, they are understandable, but in my opinion, they are equally deficient and dangerous. They keep us precisely in a state of juvenile minority that then translates into ugliness. I mean, when you go and hear these speeches, at least to my ears and also to my eyes, they appear ugly. Ugly images, ugly words, ugly religious television programs. Have you ever watched religious television programs? How bad they're made. There is no poetry, because there is no search for the vital sense. We want the sense, but we want a living one, an actual sense. We don't want a sense, as to say, for mummies, a mummified meaning, as the crazy old Dylan Thomas said. We took Christ and put him in a bulletin board like a dead mouse, mummified. Where is the living? Where is the living? So the sense is the living. The living is either living or dead. And if it's living, you feel it. The living is alive. So these are, in my opinion, the two easy and vain answers that we could call the nihilist answer and the neo-fundamentalist answer to the problem of meaning that we find ourselves having to recover today. Then there is no meaning, the structure of meaning that is human life in itself has no meaning, or you have to look for the meaning outside of yourself in something that it's already been codified, objectified outside, that, let's say, it asks a regressive adhesion. Is there another way? Here, this is the question that cries out in the unconsciousness of our planet. Is there another way? This is the question that cries out in each one of us. Is there any other possibility than these two terrible and deadly solutions? And let's move on to the fourth step. I believe there is. Or rather, I should say, I know there is. But this new experience of meaning, if we want to meet it, to embrace it, it requires an ongoing passage through what we might call a collapse of our claim of control and intellectual self-sufficiency, which is to say, this new experience of meaning arises precisely at the very moment when the whole way of searching for a meaning that guides us in ordinary life collapses. There is a moment, and it's precisely the moment that we're talking about it, in which the whole structure of meaning becomes a problem. In that moment, you can give in to the pretense of going on questioning with the same tools you've been using up to now. You can renounce to that and try to put yourself in a different state. We might say so. This experience, regenerated, renewed experience of the mystery of the meaning of the world, and therefore of the being, and therefore being of myself, that I'm giving meaning to this moment, this experience requires that I go through death, the death of my little self, that thinks he knows who he is, that thinks it can control and define the meaning or anything else. And it's precisely in this nothing of the meaning, in this nothing that I know about myself, in this moment where everything collapses, in this lack, absolute lack. It is only in that moment that life and its meaning participates in me, within me, in a new way now. So death, let's go back to that point, death becomes that valve that opens if we go through it, if we do not defend ourselves, if we do not pretend to persist in our little self. It becomes that valve that opens up to another dimension, another experience of being. So it is true that death is like the crucial junction of the questions of meaning, but this junction, we could say, is an initiatory step. Therefore, we don't pass to the other way of experiencing life and its meaning by remaining as we are, by staying in our old categories, in our old conceptions. To understand, we don't pass to the other experience of being. And here Heidegger also has said the essential. You know that Heidegger said that from authentic life to the most authentic life, there is what he calls the anticipatory decision of death, which is to say, if I now accept my mortality and I accept to die, and this is an exercise, ladies and gentlemen, it's not something that I do like this. Learning to die is an art. It is the art of learning to love, which is learning to be one. You cannot be one to the extent that you are separate. And you cannot renounce to your separation except by dying in it. There is no other way. Therefore, if you really want to enter into another dimension of being, to have another experience of being, of life, of the meaning of your life, you have to accept or renounce to the end, to your illusory claim of being separate, of being a puppet. A little puppet. Each one of us is a little puppet. We're not this. What are we? What is communicating between us at this very moment? What is putting us in communion and communication? What? That is the place that can absorb us. But I have to give up. I have to give up the pretense of being a little me, a little monologuing me, a crazy person who speaks his mind. May God save me from speaking my mind. I hope I haven't said anything of mine. It's such a bore. All these little egos talking about themselves. How boring. And how useless is that? How much useless literature still circulates of little eagles that still keeps telling us how sad they are, you know? How many useless novels? Likely I don't read them, but when I do, when it happens, they're full of these little stories about the little egos who won't never die. So they just haven't understood that you just have to die, and don't be so annoying. And this is your freedom, a real liberation. You have to die to your little ego, die to this trap, this illusion, the separation, this martyrdom. And this is the only way that can open you up. Heidegger teaches the anticipatory decision of that is the passage to authentic life, the only one. It is the only passage so that you can understand that the meaning of being is given to you. The meaning of being is given to you. That is why you give meaning. You give meaning because you receive it continuously. Here it is, even now, in this very moment. This is a constitution of the human being and of its making sense. But who are these little men who arrogate to themselves the right to say that there is no sense? Poor Russell. Poor Bertrand Russell. A great man, but very, very small. Very small at the initiatory level. He should have gone to the initiatory kindergarten. They would have explained to him that his vision of things is beautiful. It is the very starting point for the initiatory path. In the Buddhist tradition, the moment of nibbida, so the moment when you realize that everything is vain, is the beginning of the spiritual path. It is the 𝗬𝗓𝗓𝗓. 𝗬𝗓𝗓𝗓, of course, that all of you have read in Hebrew. I hope you know it and you sing it every night. And didn't Didn't you say this was a precondition, Gustavo? Too bad. Anyway, the 𝗘𝗟𝗟𝗟𝗔, ladies and gentlemen. What does it say? It says what Russell says: vanity of vanities, everything is vanity. You work, you study, it's all vanity. You get married, it's all vanity. What are you getting married for? So old Eliot used to say, all the dancers have gone under the hill. What the hell are you doing? But did you notice the book immediately after 𝗘𝗟𝗟𝗟𝗔 in the biblical canon? Who knows that? Job? No. Well, my students, they know it. What is that? Yes, the Song of Solomon. What does it mean? It means that it is precisely the crossing of this illusion, of this mourning. You understand that 𝗘𝗟𝗟𝗟𝗔 is a mourning. It's precisely the crossing of this nothing is not rejected, leave to the fullest, which then opens me to erotic love. That is, you return to earth with this power of life, because you have freed yourself from these limits of death, of your illusions, of your fears. Slowly, it is a process, and then you can celebrate erotic love. Erotic love, that is just the earth. Be faithful to the earth, Zarathustra said, but to love the earth you have to die to the ego-driven illusion of separation. Otherwise you cannot love the earth. You cannot love the earth. How can you love it if there is no meaning, no sense? How can you do that? It is a ridiculous love, it's a rhetorical love, it's a sentimentalistic love. Oh my God, no sentimentalism, religious sentimentalism, dear God, forgive me. Certain church songs that when I hear them, I understand 𝗍𝗍𝗧, I understand 𝗍𝗍𝗧, I understand the enlightenment, I understand that one can become anti-clerical, anti-Christian. If this were Christianity, I would immediately become Islamic and Muslim. At least they're quieter. But where does this come from? So, I already explained to you, this ugliness comes from the lack of vital sense. That is, when the spirit is not there, the vital and the vitality is not there, and it's missing, well, then it flows back into something ugly, kitschy. So now, we have come to an important point. In order to open ourselves up to a new, unheard of and free experience of life, we must undergo a passage that we will call initiatory. We have to understand that it's the form of our ego that can no longer understand the meaning of things and therefore cannot order a meaningful life. That's why we're all in such a crisis. This is the anthropological threshold that we are experiencing. This is a new way of making sense that is struggling to be born. This passage between a no longer and a structure of meaning of the past era no longer works. So nihilism triumphs, but the new way of giving meaning to life is still just embryonic. It's very small, and it's opposed, small and hated, small and persecuted. As in the biblical archetype, the newborn is hated. Herod wants to kill the newborn king, the new meaning. He wants to kill him. He slaughters all the innocents, and then all the powers of this world want to kill him. Pilate, the empire, Caiaphas, the temple, Herod, the political power, they want to kill him because the true new meaning, the free man, overwhelms them. And they will always try to kill him, but then they will be defeated and exterminated. That's true, sure. They're already dead, walking dead. And the walking dead are dangerous, as all zombies and vampire stories teach us. They're very dangerous because they suck blood, clear. So you have to defend yourself and get ready. So if this is quite clear, and then I want to talk about two substantial elements that are revealed to us in this new way of living the meaning and therefore living life. First point, in that dimension that must be continually rediscovered, even now. It's a state of the mind that comes and goes, and we must continually search for that because it escapes. And when you're distracted, you find yourself again the little ego terrified by that and pray to black magicians who want to make you a meaningless being at their mercy. So this state makes us understand a simple thing that we forget, that is, life is given to us. Did you forget about that? Quiet. So we start by keeping our thinking on very simple data. Life is given to us by our mother, by our father. It's obvious. Jung said, did you create yourself on your own? Jung used to say, the very moment that man realizes that he did not create himself, he is already well underway, because you understand that life is given to you, not only life, but also language. Did I invent Italian language? Did you invent Italian language? This magnificent language that is Italian, this extraordinary language, the most beautiful language in the world, I must say that. Everyone must think that their own language is the best. Don't tell me that all languages are just the same. For goodness sake, they're equal. Maybe God sees them as equal, but not for me. For me, Italian is Italian. I speak Italian, I love Italian, I write in Italian. It's like saying that all mothers are the same. Well, not really. Yes, theoretically, but then my mother is my mother, right? All right, that's the way we are, guys. This is also humility. So, did I invent this magnificent language? No. It was given to me, transmitted to me. It's also called mother tongue, by my mom, by dad, by the teachers, and then by the great books that I read in Italian, and by the even better books that I wrote in Italian. Well, advertising, yes, stop everything, block everything, advertising. Therefore, life is given to us, and in the same way also the meaning of life. And it's given to us moment by moment. So we are transceivers. We do not procreate life or the meaning of life in an autonomous form. And how do we continue? How can we continue to receive meaning, which is life now? Because you see, this is continuously given. Now, the problem is that we're afraid. We have an enormous fear of this exuberant life, and therefore we defend ourselves. Yes, we want life. We want life, but if I have to say, in homeopathic doses, very little by little, because too much life that we are not able to experience will overwhelm us. So, in order to learn to receive life, we have to practice this continuous work, that is to die to the little ego, which basically defends itself from life. Then open yourself, transcend your limits, and by transcending yourself, open yourself to the continuous advent of life that gives us its meaning continuously, even now. This is dynamic. This is an initiatory dynamic. The ego cannot fit in this. The ego would like the answer. So will you tell me the meaning of life? The meaning of life is that you have to go, well, just go away. If somebody asks me, okay, what is the meaning of life? Or if someone is really asking me about that and is looking and searching for it, well, I'll tell, okay, we have a path that lasts 7 years. Do you want to start a serious path to begin to understand the question? Let's do it together. It's a path that we can do together. If you like it, you continue. If you don't like it, you quit it. During this journey, you will learn to die. Are you happy? I can tell you that learning to die means learning to live, because if you don't learn to die, you don't live. And if you don't learn to die in this sense, you don't even know what love is, what is joy, being one. You don't know it. You can't know it. You're detached. You cannot have the slightest idea of what life is, the meaning of the universe, the invisible. You don't know anything. You're blind. You're a mole. So, would you like to open your eyes with me? Do we want to do it together? It takes time to begin to understand, and all other ways are lies. They are either Bertrand Russell or the neo-fundamentalism. They're not going anywhere, I'm afraid. So this is the first very important point. The meaning of the world is given to us because life is given to us, and it is given to us to the extent that you receive it. As the one, if somebody said, to everyone who has, more shall be given, but for the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. That was probably today's reading. He always speaks in the present tense, always speaks in the present tense, always speaks present because he is present. So it's the meaning is a continuous giving, living, now, spirit, presence, vital energy, truth, all together. The way, the meaning, the truth, and the life, the same thing. It's nothing but a way of being me. So I is the way, the truth, and the life. The I is this. So this evening, as a great meaning, I give meaning to what I want. Tonight as an enormous meaning to me, and I hope that a river full of sense and meaning will run through your bodies, your souls. Now, do we want it? Do we want it? Do we want it until we die? Or are we pretending? And nobody else can do this for us. That time is over. The intermediation is over. The internet is useful in this. We are hand to hand with mystery, with that, with nothingness, with God, with meaning, with life, with eros, with love, all together, hand to hand. Everyone makes his own choice. Les jeux ont fait, rien ne va plus. So, did you play? Everyone will reap what has sown. This is a universal law that is both in the Jewish Christian biblical tradition and also in the Hindu tradition. With different languages, they're just saying the same thing. They universally agree. So let's have no illusions. I wrote this book, which is called Life and Work, a biography, because I wanted to tell that in the insignificance of life of any human being, there is everything we called and we were talking about and we experience. Not because I am something or somebody. I'm nothing, no more than anybody else, and this is for everyone. So this is the first point. Wittgenstein writes, the sense of the world must be out of it. It is inside. You have to give it. But even more, you have to receive it in order to give it. You have to transcend yourself. You have to give up on the closures of your small self, open up yourself with humility in order to receive. Receive and embody what you receive, transmitting it to others. Therefore, life is the work, the meaning of life. What's the meaning of this work? What's the meaning of this job? The meaning of the work is the glory. The meaning of the work is to become beauty for others, to shine for others. This is the meaning of our work. This is the meaning of a fulfilled life, a life that gives life. This is the meaning. It's crystal clear. You all experienced it in the small and in the large. When did you feel the strong meaning of life? When you gave life. When you gave life. Life in any form, even a nice dish of spaghetti. You give life. You're happy, right? A nice pizza, a nice drink. A work. This is it. And then the most correct human attitude with respect to life is to embrace and thank. So to welcome, because life is given, the meaning is given, and it's given so that you can give it. And the more you give it, the more it's giving. So I'm convinced that there are meticulous intelligences at work. We believe that invisible is either non-existent or a kind of unique block. We're very naive. Excuse me for a second. If human spirit, which is the only spirit we see, is so precise, just think how precise man is. Have you ever gone to a bakery? How many types of bread have we invented? How many types of cheese have we created? How many wines? So many. Think how meticulous we are. And you believe that the invisible, the spirits, which are more refined than what we are, can they be less precise? Where they're very precise, we cannot imagine that. So, well, we cannot see that. Maybe there are 20, 30 intelligences working on hair, all good. And they're thinking, what's good for Cecchini? Well, in my opinion, it's very good for Cecchini to listen to Guzzi. And in fact, he listens to me and calls me. I'm one of the few. One of the few who has been resisting for the past 22 years. Listen to what Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote. We're talking about a philosopher, a master of mathematical logic. So, I am choosing some quotes so that you cannot tell me that I'm choosing only the mystics, poets. No, I'm choosing also people that have credit for being rational. So, Ludwig Wittgenstein in 11 June 1916 was on the Eastern Front in Galicia. He was fighting First World War on the Austrian side, and he writes on his diaries, the meaning of life, that is, the meaning of the world, we can call it God. To pray is to think about the meaning of life. So, if you want to think about the meaning of life without talking nonsense, you have to enter a mode of the thought that we can call prayer. It is a state. It is the state that I have just described to you. It's a state of opening beyond me, towards the mystery of my being. Do you understand? Therefore, the correct attitude when you get to this point, when the entire structure of meaning seems to collapse and fall into the nothingness of death, is to go through that nothing, to accept that annihilament, in order to open myself helplessly to the life that is coming, and therefore to embrace, welcome, and thank. That is what praying means. Praying comes from precarious, which means being precarious, which is the radical human state. We are precarious. The problem is, are we precarious for nothing? Or are we precarious in order to open ourselves to the truth of the being? And the truth of the being is life, and life is an eternal increase of life. This growth will never end because it never began, and we will always participate in it. Don't you feel better? I feel better. That's the only way I can live, really. When I was a boy, I wrote a verse, contemplative or death. Nothing else plays. The intermediate zones were, how to say, interdicted to me as a young child. I don't know why. So, here is the first point, very important. Second point of the fourth step. So I'm watching, I see that Paula, she's very systematic. She's saying, oh, but this is not the fifth point. Well, she put up with me for 43 years. She's part of the work, or maybe I'm part of hers. I don't know. That's the game. I figured it out, but it works. But now, so far, I don't know where she is. Okay, I don't know where did she go. Okay, there she is. So she is doing the live broadcast. Anyway, so second point. If life is such that we receive it in order to transmit it, so the question, guys, we don't have to ask it. The question is asked to us. The question is, are you giving meaning to your life? You don't have to ask, does life have meaning? You have to ask yourself, am I making sense? Am I giving a meaning to my life now, here, now? During this conference, am I trying to make sense of my life? Am I lecturing because of profession, out of boredom? Because it's in the past 22 years, this is what I've been doing. How much time have I dedicated to prepare myself for this? Well, tens of hours. You give meaning to things. You give meaning to everything you do. How much blood do you give to life so that your blood can have a meaning? That's the question. The question is asked to us. The question of the meaning is asked to us. We don't have to ask it ourselves. We have to listen to it and we have to answer. We are responsible for giving meaning to the world. Either you give meaning or you don't. If you do so, then it will have a meaning and it will be a work of art. Otherwise, your life will be just crap. We're not talking about black and white, but the more you give meaning, the more you will put effort on the meaning of your life, the better you will feel. And the less you do it, the more boring will be your life. And you can go also to the psychotherapist, but it will not solve the problem if you don't understand today that you have to give meaning. So the question is just opposite, and you have to take responsibility of it. And let's move on to the last point. It will be short and cheerful. I want to give you, in conclusion, good news. I love giving good news. I've given you thousands of good news. It's all good news and true news. So, what is the last piece of good news I want to give you guys? Giving meaning, in the sense that I explained, this work, that is to give life, to increase your life, increase the meaning of your life, beauty that is transmitted to others, this is always possible. This is difficult, ladies and gentlemen, but fundamental. There is no human condition, disease, failure, tragedy. There is no human position that does not make it possible for me to give meaning to this moment, whatever it may be, and I hope to bear witness to this until my last breath, and to celebrate what I'm saying when I'll be 250 years old and I'll die in the arms of my great-grandchildren. When full of the years, continue saying what I'm saying, I'll fly directly into the sphere of the invisible that I've loved and known so much. Well, you'll tell me it's easy to say. You can say it because things are going well for you. The book of Job, you can say it because things are going well for you. Well, then read Life and Work. And you'll see that I have said that in every moment of my life, and not everything in my life has always gone well, but then I sought a very credible witness on this point, so that you will not have a doubt about the truth of this point. And this is a decisive point. Do you know why? Because a great part of the fear that we have comes from the fact that if something happens to me, all of this that I may now even believe will collapse. And then we intimidate ourselves, we put ourselves back into our burrow, we stop receiving life with doubt. It's a struggle. It's normal. But I wanted to bring you a particularly credible witness on this point. This witness is the great psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. Does anyone know Viktor Frankl? Somebody knows him. Anyway, Viktor Frankl was one of the best known and most famous psychiatrist of the 20th century. He invented the therapy that is called logotherapy, which is really the sense of this therapy. In fact, the book is called, at the very beginning, there was the meaning. And I want to talk about Viktor Frankl because he was in several concentration camps, including Dachau, he and his whole family, and he extracted this idea of the meaning in such situations. Therefore, if he tells us this, if Viktor Frankl says this to us, well, we might believe. And he says, I quote, "Life proves to be unconditionally meaningful. It remains full of meaning. It has meaning and maintains it in any condition and circumstance. Because the man in the street knows that even when he's facing an unchangeable fact, indeed, just then, he can give proof of his humanity, coping with this situation and witnessing what the human being is capable of. What matters is the attitude and disposition with which he accepts the inevitable blows of fate. Tear up, and conquer to this life a meaning is granted and accorded to man until his last breath." Well, to conclude, I believe that understanding what we have tried to say in this hour and a half, more or less, is a fundamental revolutionary act to which our humanity is called. I'm convinced that we will do it, we are doing it, and we will do it because there are no alternatives for survival of our species. If we will not be able to make this step, to give birth within ourselves a freer humanity, a more open, a more self-transcendent humanity, therefore more alive, more vital, more energetic, more capable of giving meaning to life, will be buried between one pandemic and another, between one state of emergency and another, between one police state and another, will be reduced to the annihilation of human beings. The process of dehumanization are very advanced. From 𝗟𝗘𝗟𝗟𝗔 at the end of the 18th century also spoke about that. But today, they are accelerating at unprecedented speed, and in the face of an increasingly foolish humanity, foolish in the sense that it's obscured, and the action of the spirit is almost extinguished. But this is precisely a time when the need, the squeeze of the times, as Paul Celan called it, the 𝗦𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗔, this bottleneck, I think, will bring increasing masses of people to wake up, to seek a way out. And when we seek, we find. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. And you will find, and we can find more and more life in abundance. This is the meaning, the constant increase of life as light, wisdom, and love. Best wishes.
Bene, dopo questa appassionata
Well, after this
conferenza di Marco
very
Guzzi,
passionate
se ci
lecture
sono
by
delle
Marco
domande,
Guzzi, if there are any
vediamo se
questions,
sono arrivate.
let's see if they arrived. The question right now is, what do you mean by meaningless literature? Well, I would give you a very mean answer. I'm bad. Unfortunately, the first answer that comes out of me, it's the bad one. Then I become good. I smile and give myself up and give myself up. So, to give an obviously very synthetic answer, short answer, if anyone would like to know more, I've written a book that I consider very important called The Insurrection of the New Humanity, in which I deal with the question from a poetic and literary point of view. So there you will find something depth answers, let's say, or even some of the conference that I've done here, for example, the one on Rimbaud, it's very popular. Therefore, my idea, my conviction, as I tried to explain, is that a figure of humanity, an entire historical and anthropological repertoire, which can be called in many ways egoic, egoic, logical, this I, this ego, that it's self-referential, this figure, this idea of humanity is consuming itself and it's exhausting. And all this literature that continues only to express this very terminal extinction, from my point of view, it's no more poetic. It's no longer the poetic strength to announce something new, because the great literature has always embodied and proclaim the various sensibilities in advanced respect to what community will experience. For example, Dostoevsky discovers the unconscious, the abyss. Before that, then in the 20th century, we then all became men and women of the deep, of the abyss in some way to understand. That's what I believe, that in order to give more concrete hints, perhaps the less egoic, poetic that it's still true is 𝗬𝗙𝗕𝗓𝗔. From that moment on, from my point of view, all poetry and literature as endlessly recycled, let's say, the end of the ego, in an increasingly tiring and stale way. Up until today, we have literature as a genre of consumption rather than art. Well, it's craftsmanship at best. When you say, okay, well, that writer is writing well. Well, is this the 8th grade? Yeah, well, he writes well. Well, a writer does not have to write well, he has to destroy you. Kafka said a book must fall on you like a tile. Otherwise, why are you writing? To sell books? So I have a radical vision. You understand it. I'm very radical also because I'm forced to this radicality given, let's say, the sleepiness that I often have to endure. So I see very little, and of course here it would be necessary to explain the 20th century, to deal with each and every author. For example, in my opinion, in the 20th century there are poets, on one hand, that clearly experimented the transegoic openness, 𝗍𝗘𝗟𝗟𝗔, more transegoic than that. And from there, René Char, Dylan Thomas, Dino Campana. The best Hermeticism, of which I would, however, make an anthology. There is a whole strand of poets who have partly perceived this anthropological novelty and partly has been sucked into the literary representation of the poet. Also because it's very difficult not to be. You have to give up some social configurations, for example. You have to put yourself in that absurd place of the emerging where nobody knows who you are. It's very difficult to say who I am. That's very good. It means that I am at the very point where I want to be. So, after René Char said that after Rimbaud, poetry stops to be a literature. And what does it become? So all my life, it's, let's say, I tried to explain and to answer this question. So it's a transegoic action, I would say. It's transliterary action. So a laboratory, an anthropological laboratory that it's listening to the word, the transegoic words, not only about poetry, but also in communication and even in politics in the end. This is also an idea that even Rimbaud had. There have been 1,000 attempts. The Surrealist, for example, as you know, with André Breton, they decided unblocked to adhere to communism at a certain point, right? They deluded themselves that communism, we were in the 20s and 30s, was the political realization of surrealism, was surrealism in politics. René Char immediately said, I smell police. 47, that was 47. René Char was a great hero of the French resistance. So it's a very complex story. You have to read it again, to understand again the history of literature, which is the history of the world, basically also in philosophy. In my opinion, after the turn Nietzsche-Heidegger, then there is a flood of philosophical production that is no longer philosophy. It's nothing. It's secondary literature, very boring. That is why so many people hate me. Many philosophers hate me. Are there any other questions? Yes, there are a couple. So, 𝗦𝗦𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 said, the caress is the most evolved communicative act of the human being. In Life and Work, you write about imagining a fraternal community in which people will know how to make their body talkative. They will know how to make caresses, hugs, and widespread tenderness eloquent, and will know that the humble contact of the skin melt our glass bubbles better than 100,000 words. What do you think about 𝗦𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's statement? I would like to hug you, thank you. All right, I understand what you want to say. Do you know how many experiential, political, spiritual groups, spiritual, political, ecological groups, I've seen that they hug each other, they hug again, and they kiss each other, and hug trees, onions, cats, dogs. For God's sake. But since I was born vinegar, in Rome we say I was born vinegar. It means that I am mean, I'm a bad herb, because someone who was born vinegar, what hope does he have to become wine? You need a miracle, right? Well, it's not enough that people hug each other, embrace, to believe that they are actually a little less selfish. Because since I've seen thousands of people, I do this, I've been accompanying people for decades, I know very well that, oh dearest, and then I hug you, they hug each other, they squeeze, they're moved, and after 30 seconds, you see shadows that, compared to Hyde, Mr. Hyde, it's, it's just a small dog. So I'm sober. I'm very Christian in this. Christians says, give each other the kiss of peace, little kiss, and then show me. Show me other things. Are you really relaxed? It's hard. We are shielded by millennial fears that we don't really know in their origin. So being a little more open to each other is a lot of work. It doesn't come naturally. It's not enough to want it. It's not enough to want it. It's not enough to have an emotion of a moment. I got so excited. I do not care. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. People get excited for bullshit at the stadium, watching cartoons. It doesn't mean anything. It may or may not mean anything. Let's put it that way. Got it? Eliot said, the poet must appear like a banker, an ordinary person, a clerk. I mean, someone who really has chaos inside doesn't need to appear extravagant. No. Ezra Pound said, poets with feathers on their hats, isn't it? Poets who are poets go around being poets. They're just boys. They're kids. There's lots of work to do. There's a lot of work to die to yourself. Rumi is a great poet. Jalal al-Din Rumi, a mystical poet of the Islamic 13th century, the founder of the dervishes, that one. When the castle is crumbling, you will find the treasure. After that, we can embrace each other. For goodness sake, let's be careful not to delude ourselves. So, as for point one, if I understood well, our action have the purpose to give benefit to the others. So, who deliberately hurt someone, what meaning, what benefit and value increase does he receive? Well, there is no thief, there is no murderer, there is not even a serial killer who is not convinced that he will get a benefit from his act. And of course, we know that this is a distorted one, but this person subjectively is convinced that he will get a benefit. I mean, when Hitler wants to exterminate the Jewish people, he is convinced that he's doing it for good. Actually, the fundamental idea is that he has to defend himself. He is a victim, so the human brain, the mind, is well distorted and twisted. So it's very clear that if you put it on the absolute level, you say, but what benefit? But instead, there is a benefit there. And in our small and little bad ways, we know that. So, for example, someone smokes and he knows that smoking is bad, but in reality he does that because he wants a benefit, maybe a benefit that he knows it's hurting him, but it's always a benefit. He doesn't want to lose that moment of intoxication, that habit, the little satisfaction and oral gratification to which he has now become used. He does not want to lose it, so therefore we have to distinguish between what is an objective benefit, and only God knows, and what I think it's a benefit anyway, and that accompanies me in every act, even the worst one. So, if there are no further questions, we will end here this beautiful speech by Marco Guzzi. I would like to thank the audience again for the great participation in these 4 meetings, and the appointments for the next editions of initiatives that we have here in Misano. Thank you, everybody.